Have you ever wanted to start like a highly scalable business, but you didn't know where to start? Well, my name is Ella Livingston, aka That Chocolate Lady, and I own an ethical chocolate company. And after 7 years, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm about to say it, 7 years is a really long time. But after 7 years of running this business, and pretty much taking advantage of every resource available in my city and outside of my city, I feel like I've learned a few things. And so in this series, I want to share with you almost like a how-to guide of like how to do certain things that I've learned. And so this one is about just like the general overview of how to start a highly scalable business. I started my first year and back in 2018 and we made like 600, well, it's really I, because it was just me, but I made like $660. And now we are a multiple six-figure business, soon to be seven, and eventually nine. That's the goal. And so I'm going to share with you guys what I've learned along the journey. So now, because a little bit of overview, this is, I don't know, I guess the first video of the series. But because I hate editing, I'm just going to film this all the way through. So this is going to be imperfect, but that's okay. All right, here we go. So the first thing that I want to start with is when it comes to like starting a highly scalable business, the very first, before you start registering and figuring out your name, your logo, sign up for that LLC. Don't none of that. The first thing you want to do is to make sure that you are solving a real problem with your business. I mean, it feels like that should be obvious, but a lot of people when they start their businesses, they start based off of like what they're skilled at doing or what they enjoy doing or what they like. But here's the thing that I've learned about a highly scalable business, especially one that you're leading. You are not going to be the one that is doing that thing. So for example, we have a chocolate company here, right? At this point in time, as the CEO, as the founder, I am not the one in the production kitchen making the chocolate. There is a big difference between being a chocolatier and owning a chocolate company. Owning a chocolate company means I'm working on the business, not in the business. And then being a chocolatier means I'm working in the business, right? So because of that huge difference, especially if you're going to be leading that big company, it doesn't necessarily matter like what it is. It does not have to be something that you're, this sounds so backwards from a lot of advice. It does not have to be necessarily something that you're good. Oh my gosh, it sounds great. Something that you're necessarily good at doing. I am not good at making chocolate. I am the first one. When I get back there, I am messing up the recipes and they are kicking me out. Okay, that is not my gift, and I know that. All right, but I am good at growing and marketing and the business side of things, and so that just fits for me as the CEO. And so that's what I'm doing. But all that to say, you do not have to necessarily start with something that you're good at. Now, if this is going to be like a lifestyle business that you just want, to bring income to sustain your family and your employees, then that's fine. Let it be something that you are passionate and that you love doing, and that you're making the product and you're also marketing and selling, or maybe you hire somebody else to do the marketing and selling. You just focus on the making. That's okay. But if you want it to be a highly scalable business, it does not need to be something that you're good at. It just needs to solve a real problem. That is the priority. Now, how do you know what problems to solve or what problem to focus on for your business? There's lots of problems in the world. It is easy to start. It is easier to see problems that you notice exist in the communities that you're a part of. So, for example, I live here in I don't know, Chattanooga, and I've noticed that there are a lot of people who, oh my gosh, what's a problem in Chattanooga that I don't know that I've noticed? I don't even know. Okay, let me do another example. Oh yeah, here's a good one. So as a business owner, I've noticed that we constantly have issues with our grease trap. And if you follow us on social media, you know the hoopla we just went through this past summer or this past spring with one of our grease trap companies. And so I, after doing research, because it's hard to find a grease trap removal company, and there are not very many of them. And what I've noticed is that, like with a lot of plumbing companies, we have a lot of what you see that private equity is doing to like a lot of other industries, I'm seeing it in the plumbing industry as well. And so, anyways, there's like one company that's like just buying up a lot of the businesses and like putting them all together, or keeping the names, but like it's the same company servicing. So, for example, this one company that we use messed up, so we switched to another company. Well, it turns out it's the same people, just under a different company name. So we still got the same bad, horrible service. But anyways, but I was just like, we need a grease trap removal company that has like great service, because they don't answer the phone sometimes, they're not responding, they're showing up at whatever time that is appropriate for them, despite the fact that we have to shut down production, and so we need it to be on a schedule. You like I said, you can't reach them for anything. And then sometimes they're just like charging. Oh, also like sometimes they're like not doing a really good job with the actual cleaning. So I was just like, we need a grease trap company that does great service and that has great customer service. That's a problem that I wanted to solve. It just so happened that I was going through that problem myself, so I really understood. But it could be an example of something like that. What is a real problem that you see around you that people are struggling with? Maybe there's a lapse in the market and there's not a lot of sugar-free, gluten-free, I don't know, cupcakes in your city, right? You can get them if you go to a bigger city, but in your local area, there's you don't find that product. Whatever that problem is, make sure it is a real problem that people are having. Now, once you discover what that real problem is, then you have to figure out, okay, are there enough people who struggle with this problem and is it enough of a problem that they're willing to part with their hard-earned dollars in order for me to provide them a solution? Some things, absolutely. That grease trap removal thing, hell yeah, because I have to get my grease trap removed. I have to have a company doing it for me. We cannot do it ourselves. It is very difficult to dispose of the grease, right? You have to have special permits and licensing, etc. And so we need a company to do that for us. And so, yeah, it's a huge problem for us. Well, it's not just us. There are a bunch of other restaurants, food production facilities, anything that manufactures food that deals with grease in their plumbing needs to have a grease trap. And if you have a grease trap, then you need that grease trap to be cleaned periodically. And some places it's monthly, some places it's quarterly, some places it's whatever, however often, but it's a continuous service. And so for the grease trap removal company, 100%, there are so many restaurants in this area that need and are required to have that service. And so there is enough of a market for that. So you need to figure out, are there enough people that have that problem? And are those grease restaurants experiencing the same horrible service, horrible customer service that I'm experiencing? And if so, are they willing to switch? So once you figure out if you have a real problem, then you find out, are there enough people that also have this problem? Is there enough of a market for me? And are they willing to switch over to my solution, whatever that is, but are they willing to switch over to my solution in order for me to provide that, to help them with their problem? Now, how do you, if you don't know exactly like where to like find those people, right? A lot of times it's just really like listening to the community. So whatever communities you're tapped into, whether it's Facebook groups, if you know you're on a side of TikTok like Book Talk, or I don't know, Tea Talk, or you know, DIY Talk, or whatever, designing talk, you know, real estate talk, wherever communities you're a part of on social media, tap in and see what are the problems these groups or people or these communities are like dealing with that have to do with that problem you're trying to solve. You can also, like, if you know that this is something that, you know, family or local friends are struggling with, you can also put out surveys to see if they would try your solutions. You just got to get really, really creative based on the information that you have and based on, like, the access that you have. All right. Then you build the solution. So you found a problem. You found there's enough of a group of people that are struggling with this problem. Let me go figure out what that solution for them is. So you build your solution. Your solution can be a service. Your solution can be a product. Your solution can be tech, software, whatever. Build that solution. And you want to make sure your solution actually works. I mean, it sounds obvious, but yes. It actually works and it actually fulfills that need. So for the grease trap removal company, I would actually have to go build that solution. All right. Make sure I know what I'm doing, right? Make sure, and like I said, this is where it, like, if you're starting from like no funding, et cetera, a lot of the heavy lifting is going to you're going to have to do it yourself. But you don't necessarily have to be skilled at it. So, you know, I would have to learn, right? I believe everybody, like that growth mindset, anybody with enough determination can learn anything. Whatever, you can learn a new skill, you can be good at something. You just have to put in enough good practice. And so even if you're not skilled at that thing, you can learn to be skilled. You can build that product. Maybe you can become creative with, if it's the software and you don't have software coding skills. I mean, you can learn. There's also ways you can build apps without any coding. But then there's also like platforms that you can, for very cheap, find somebody to build that software for you. So you just have to get really creative about like building that solution. And it also depends on what that solution is. If I'm looking specifically at Cocoa Asante and the problem and the solution that we were solving for people, I am not a chocolatier. I suck at baking. I don't understand. I can't explain to you how horrible I am at it, but I learned. It took a lot of YouTube, Google, blogs, following chocolatiers, who were teaching what they were doing. It took a lot of that, but eventually I learned, and I learned enough to create a product that people like enjoyed. It wasn't perfect, but I just needed something to get out there to start, promoting and selling and showing people the solution that we had. All right, so to fund, sometimes depending on what that product is, you may need to also get creative about like funding. So when I started Cocoa Asante, I started with savings, and then as we grew little by little, we did Kiva, which is a crowd-funded zero-interest loan, and we also, of course, applied for grants because we participated in a lot of like local like entrepreneurship programs that gave us access to some of the funding resources that they had, and so that's actually how we got the Kiva. That's how we got some of our grants. That's how we got access to some of our, this is going to sound crazy, this is not a crowdfunded, but a zero interest loan through a local credit union, was because we were a part of these organizations. And so they gave us resources. So you got to get very creative about how you're going to fund the building of your project or your product if you don't have any capital, and you need a good amount of capital. Then you have to actually, now that you've found a real problem, you've figured out that there's a real market for it. There are people that are struggling with that problem that want to pay somebody to solve it for them, or pay for a product that will solve that problem for them. You've built that solution. Now you got to test it out, right? Before you could even say, hey, I got the solution. Let's test it out a little bit. So you're going to want to take that first little prototype, right? Deploy it out to whatever your that audience's, that target customer is, and from then it becomes not a game, but almost a game of, we have this product, does it work? Yes, it does work. Or make these changes. Okay, I've made these changes, how about now? Okay, great. And then you also kind of figure out, you niche down in this testing phase, like who really your target customer is. Because you might think it's one person, but then you might find a whole different community that says, hey, we actually need this product that you've created, but we use it in this different way. And so you can kind of hone in on who your target customer is that way. So when we created our ethical chocolate, Almost Too Pretty to Eat, like our target customer was like people who just wanted to enjoy chocolate, women specifically who wanted to enjoy the experience of chocolate. As we honed in on our target customer, then we found out that corporations wanted to gift our chocolate. So we found another community that was looking at a different way to use our product. And so then we found a whole nother target customer. All right. And then after you've tested it out and you've gotten a good product that you feel about, once again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good enough to deploy to the market so that you can at least get some funds to grow. You then market that solution. Social media is a great way to market that solution. We have found a lot of success on social media. I still 100% believe social media is the best way to reach customers, especially if you don't have a lot of capital. All right. I know that some businesses exist without social media, but I don't know how. Like, I do not know how. Yeah. It's just social media has been such a game changer for us because it allows us to have direct conversations with our customer, and so allows us to constantly improve our product, making sure that we're always meeting the needs of our customers. And it also allows us to find a platform or create a platform where we can share our story and build our very own community of people. So market that solution. Sometimes people will build or create a business, build something, and then after they launch it, they're just sitting there like twiddling their thumbs, like, why are people not buying? You have to heavily market your solution, and you have to market it in a way that is actually reaching who you want it to reach in the way they want to be reached, not the way you want to reach them, but the way they want to be reached. Okay. And then, constantly retargeting them. So sometimes we'll come up with a solution. We're like, well, they've seen me pop up on their social media feed before. And you have to have, I think there was like data. It was like you have to have like 8 different touch points. That means somebody has to see or interact with your business 8 different times before an average of 8 different times before they become a customer. That's a lot. So you are going to constantly be marketing your story, the problem you're solving, why it's important to you, what your product is, the features, the benefits, all of that good stuff. You're going to constantly have to be putting that out there and marketing that product because you are convincing people, hey, you have work. People work hard for their money. And for a lot of people, they're exchanging time for that money. And so in order for people to part with that money, they're not thinking, hey, it's only $20. They're thinking, hey, I had to work this many hours in order to afford this. So it needs to be worth it for them to go out and try, because they don't know if your solution is going to work for them. And so you need to convince them enough to try your solution and part with their hard-earned dollars. And so constantly communicate, what value are you providing for that customer, in order for them to say, hey, it's worth it for me to part with my dollars for this product. And then after you market that solution, it becomes a cycle. And it's a constant cycle of updating your product, honing in on your target customer, updating your communication, getting capital, and expanding with that capital, then updating again, and it just becomes a cycle and a cycle and a cycle until eventually you get to the stage where you are in that revenue range that you want to be in. So, yeah, that is from A to Z. All right, how to build a business. Number 1, just to review, when you're starting a business, this is what you need to do. Make sure you're solving a real problem. Make sure you're solving that real problem for like real people, and there's enough people that you're solving that problem for, that are willing to like try your solution. Number 3, all right. Number 3, build that product, build that solution. Number 4, test it out. And number 5, if it works, market that solution, and then just go through number 6, the cycle over and over and over again. You never really arrive with a business. There's no place where you just, you get there and you're like, okay, we have our key product. We are selling whatever. We can just sit back and relax and just let this, let it go. No. If you are not constantly, especially if you want to be a business that exists for a long time, you can't just like stop growing. You have to continuously be growing and improving and innovating. And even if you're not a tech company, you have to constantly be innovating, improving, growing, because if you're not, that is when you start to die. Okay. It is the same reason why we see a lot of these bigger corporations go out. Well, it's not always the reason, but it is sometimes the case where we see a lot of these bigger corporations start to die and go out of businesses because they're not innovating, they're not growing, they're not updating with the time. So make sure if you're growing a business that is not you. All right, I hope that was helpful. If you have any comments or questions, let me know. If you have any comments or think differently, definitely certainly let me know as well. This is just based off of my experience and what I've seen. But hopefully this helps you in your journey of growing your business. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. Bye. I don't even know I did that, but bye.